I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. Through the thin walls of the executive conference suite, the kind they always think is soundproof, I heard my name followed by a quiet scoff. "She's a legacy risk," someone said. A pause. Then laughter. The voice belonged to Aiden Rourke, our new COO, fresh from Silicon Valley, all buzzwords and bravado, not a day over 38. He said it so casually, like I was just a stubborn line of old code getting in the way of his shiny new system. Too embedded in the old structure. Too cautious. Too Reese. Another laugh, this time from someone I'd trained years ago. I stood there frozen in the hallway, coffee in hand, hearing myself reduced to a liability, a risk, not a person, not a leader who'd kept this infrastructure standing through 4 cyber attacks, 3 CEO transitions, and a system migration no one thought we'd survive. They didn't know I was on the other side of the door. But what stung most wasn't what they said. It was how easy it was to say it, how normal it felt for them to write me off like I was already gone. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me this: where in the world are you listening from right now? And more importantly, have you ever felt quietly pushed aside, like your experience suddenly stopped being valuable the moment someone newer showed up? Leave a comment if that hits close. Your story might remind someone out there that they're not the only one. People forget who builds the foundation until it cracks. When I first walked into Graviton Logistics, we were renting 3.5 floors in an old downtown tower in St. Louis. No name on the door, just a badge that barely worked, and an office coffee machine that leaked more than it brewed. I was 27, barely confident enough to lead a team, but somehow someone believed I could. My title back then, Junior Systems Engineer. My actual job, keep the entire infrastructure from setting itself on fire during peak load. I stayed late, learned fast, and made myself useful in every room no one else wanted to be in. There were no applause, no spotlights, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when the system didn't break, it was probably because I caught something before it did. 5 years in, I was leading the architecture team. 10 years in, I had built DeepGate, our custom access framework that powered everything from shipment tracking to cross-state compliance logs. It wasn't flashy, it didn't make the front page of any tech magazine, but it worked. And it worked because I didn't cut corners. I designed redundancies where no one asked for them. I documented edge cases that no one believed would ever happen until they did. I remember one night, 2015, when a cyber attack out of Mexico City targeted our entire Midwest routing network. The system held, not because of luck, but because the protocols were already there waiting. I had written them 2 years earlier in a hotel lobby during a snowstorm. They call people like me legacy, but I call it infrastructure. Still, the longer I stayed, the more invisible it all became. The stronger the foundation got, the less they remembered who poured the concrete. And maybe that's when they started to forget what would happen if it ever cracked. But I hadn't, and soon neither would they. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about change. When it comes quietly, you almost don't notice until it's already behind you, closing the door. At first, it was small. The engineering syncs I used to lead got moved to new time slots, ones I somehow never got invites to. Then the dashboards I built started getting edited without notice. I figured maybe it was growing pains. New leadership, new priorities, no big deal. But then Aiden started renaming departments. Systems resilience became agile architecture. Security pipeline became innovation flow. Same people, same work, just different words. And slowly, I noticed the people around me changing too. New hires with titles like Velocity Strategist and Ops Futurist started showing up to meetings I wasn't even briefed on. They were young, polished, good at talking fast and saying very little. One of them, Wes, I remember him well, walked up to me in the break room once and said, "You must be Reese, right? You've been here forever." He meant it as a joke. I laughed politely, but something about it stung more than it should have. Then came the reorganizations. Project leads shuffled, documentation trails started disappearing. Tools I had maintained for years were quietly replaced with newer, flashier versions no one had vetted. When I asked questions, I got smiles. When I raised concerns, I got redirected. The system was still standing, but something was shifting underneath it, like the ground was moving, just slightly, just enough to throw you off balance if you stood still too long. I remember staring at my calendar one morning, noticing a recurring meeting I used to run had vanished. Not canceled, just reassigned. That was the first time I felt it, that cold, creeping sense that someone had started rewriting the script and I was no longer on the cast list. What I didn't know yet was how far they were willing to go to erase me from it completely. It was a Tuesday, not the kind of day you'd expect your world to tilt sideways. Just another normal morning, coffee, inbox, status, dashboards. Routine, familiar, safe. Until it wasn't. I logged in like always, ready to run my weekly audit on Deepgate. That's the security core I built from scratch, by the way. The one that keeps our entire national logistics network from collapsing under a single bad credential. But this time, access denied. I blinked, refreshed, tried again. Access denied. It had to be a glitch. Maybe someone updated permissions overnight without syncing them. I opened my secondary console. Unauthorized access. Clearance revoked. My hands froze over the keyboard. There are moments in life when your body reacts before your mind catches up. I felt my stomach drop like the floor had given way beneath me. My heart was racing, but everything else still. I tried to open the admin log. Nothing. Tried to trace permission history. Nothing. My own name, Reese Calder, wasn't listed on the Access Registry anymore. Not inactive, not pending review. Gone. Erased. Someone had manually revoked my credentials from the very system I had architected, maintained, and protected for over a decade. No email, no explanation, no warning. Just a silent lockout, as if I'd never existed. For a few minutes, I just sat there, staring at the screen like maybe it would all undo itself. It didn't. And in that silence, a different kind of realization set in. The kind that doesn't shout, but whispers something colder. This wasn't an accident. Someone had planned this, and whoever it was, they didn't want me in the system anymore. Not just professionally, structurally. What they didn't realize, though, was that cutting me out wouldn't be as clean as they thought, because the system might not remember my name, but the architecture still did. 3 days after I lost access, I found the breach. I wasn't even supposed to be in the network anymore. Technically, I'd been locked out. But there were old monitoring scripts I had written years ago, quiet tools, nothing flashy. They ran independently on a few isolated nodes, reporting anomalies directly to a secure backup channel, a habit I picked up after one too many sleepless nights cleaning up other people's mistakes. That morning, one of those alerts came through. It flagged a packet anomaly in our Florida zone, a credential trail being rerouted to Sacramento, which made no sense. That path wasn't in any of our authorized configurations. I dug deeper. The source, an internal credential, new, created under a project tab I didn't recognize. The user, some junior DevOps contractor onboarded just 2 weeks ago. And here's the thing, he had admin-level clearance. No two-factor, no audit trail, no redundancy check. In our system, that kind of access isn't just careless, it's dangerous. One bad script at that level, and entire regions could go dark. I documented everything, every log, every IP, every misrouted path. Wrote it up clean, no emotion, just facts. I sent the report to Aiden's office, CC'd risk compliance, and our internal audit chain. I expected questions, calls, maybe even an emergency review. What I got was silence. Then, a single email from the Office of Innovation. Thank you, Reese. Your concerns have been noted. No action is required at this time. Please direct future operational feedback through proper transition channels. That was it. Not even a name at the bottom, just a generic footer. It wasn't just dismissal, it was containment. And that's when it hit me. They didn't want to fix the breach. They wanted it buried. But if they thought I'd built a system that could be silenced that easily, they'd forgotten who wired its nerves. And something else was already moving beneath the surface, something they hadn't noticed yet. But I had. I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, not anymore, but because something didn't sit right. The way they locked me out, the way they ignored the breach, the way every response came pre-written, cold, distant, almost like they'd been preparing for this. I got up around 2 a.m., barefoot on the kitchen floor, laptop open under the dim light. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Maybe a record, a reminder, something to make sense of how they could erase me so easily. I opened my old employment contract, the one from 2011, back when the company still printed things and signed them with pens instead of tokens. Page after page of boilerplate legal language until I found it. Clause 9.13, Infrastructure Contingency Provision. I stared at the heading for a long second, then read the line beneath it. Primary system architect reserves the right to embed non-invasive structural safeguards to prevent unauthorized override or non-consensual termination access disruption, provided said provisions are documented and bound to active architecture. My heart slowed. Not from fear, from recognition. That clause wasn't theoretical. It had a name, a quiet one. Something I wrote into DeepGate years ago during a security overhaul no one outside my team had even reviewed in full. Failsafe Echo. It was a passive protocol, invisible, dormant, but not forgotten. It was designed to activate only under two conditions. 1. The architect is forcibly removed from the access registry. 2. A specific trigger phrase is used during dismissal. I hadn't thought about it in years. It was never meant to be dramatic, just a failsafe in case someone someday made a reckless call from a boardroom without understanding what they were cutting loose. And now, standing there in my kitchen staring at the clause I had once quietly inserted with no intention of ever needing it, I began to wonder, had they already tripped the wire without even realizing it? By Thursday morning, I knew what I had to do. Not as revenge, not even as defense, just obligation. When you've spent your entire career building systems to protect people, there's a point where staying silent becomes complicity, and I wasn't about to let that be my legacy. I opened a new document and started typing. Plain language. No exclamation points, no dramatic claims, just facts. I laid out the credential mismatch from Florida, the unauthorized access rerouted through Sacramento, the contractor's elevated admin privileges, and the exact risk that posed to our routing infrastructure in the Southeast and Midwest. Then I attached the supporting logs, highlighted timestamps, cited protocol policies. I even referenced past compliance updates, the ones I used to co-author, showing exactly how this violated standard chain of command access safeguards. It wasn't emotional, it was clinical, because I knew if I gave them even one excuse to call it subjective, they would. I sent it to Aiden directly, copied legal, risk oversight, internal audit, and even 2 deputy CTOs. One of them I hadn't spoken to in months, but I figured if there was any part of the company that still cared about protocol, someone in that group would. Then I waited. An hour? 2. By mid-afternoon, my inbox chimed. It was from Aiden's office. 3 lines. Thank you for your input, Reese. We have reviewed your concerns and do not consider them actionable at this time. Please focus your energy on transition priorities. I stared at the screen. No questions, no follow-up, no mention of the logs. Just dismissal. The kind that isn't loud. The kind that doesn't come with shouting or accusations. The kind that pretends to be polite while slowly pushing you toward the exit. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel confused anymore. I felt clear, because if they weren't going to listen to a warning, then they were about to learn from the consequence, and they wouldn't even see it coming. It arrived at 6:42 a.m. No subject line. Just a bold header in the body of the email, terminated, effective immediately. No greeting, no explanation, no call from HR, just 4 words. I had to read it twice before it sank in. Then I checked the sender. No reply at gravitoncorp.com. That was it. 19 years of service, 4 system rebuilds, a decade of 0 outages, ended by a bot. No handshake, no exit interview, no dignity. I should have felt devastated, but instead, I felt still. Like everything in me went quiet at once, because I recognized something. Those exact 4 words, terminated effective immediately, weren't just cold. They were specific. That phrase, it was the trigger, the one I had programmed into the fail-safe echo protocol all those years ago. It wasn't meant to be accidented by accident. It was designed to respond to language so robotic, so detached, that no real human would ever choose it, unless they were trying to disappear you without confrontation. The system didn't just recognize my removal. It recognized the manner of it. And now, quietly, invisibly, it had begun to respond. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I closed my email window, stood up, and walked to the kitchen. Made coffee the way I always did. Slow, steady, 1 scoop at a time. And as I stirred in the cream, a calm thought settled in. They think they removed me. But what they didn't know was that by using those exact words, by treating me like a line of outdated code, they hadn't just fired me. They'd activated something I'd buried deep in the core. And now the system was waking up. At 7:04 a.m., the first flag went up. It was subtle, just a failed login attempt on the Eastern Control Cluster. Someone from Atlanta trying to access routing metrics through a dashboard that no longer recognized their credentials. By 7:12, the Chicago hub dropped from the internal admin map. No alert, no error, just vanished. I was watching from my old legacy console, the one they forgot existed because it was never listed in the public access registry. I built it during the 2016 compliance overhaul when we couldn't afford downtime during live patch testing. I never decommissioned it. And clearly, no one else remembered it was there. One by one, nodes started to blink. Not in chaos, in order. Franklin, Denver, Houston, all executing the same subroutine. Revoke unverified admin chains. Purge stale overrides. Nullify unauthorized escalations. The protocol wasn't destroying anything. It was protecting itself. Undoing what shouldn't have been allowed in the first place, cleansing the infrastructure before bad decisions could spread further. I didn't touch a key, didn't enter a command. The system wasn't reacting to me. It was following rules that had lived inside its core for over a decade, rules I wrote during sleepless nights, anticipating the days someone would try to seize control without understanding what they were touching. And now that day had come. Somewhere in an office tower 800 miles away, a meeting was probably starting late because no one could access the regional routing dashboard. Someone else was probably blaming network latency for why shipments weren't syncing. But none of them, not yet, had realized what was really happening. They thought I was gone. They thought the system was theirs now. But they were about to learn what happens when the architect is removed without reading the blueprints. The call came at 7:43 a.m., 3 short rings before I picked up. No greeting, just panic. What the hell did you do? It was Adam. His voice tight clipped, the background filled with frantic voices and the dull clatter of keyboards. Someone swore softly behind him. I could hear it. Systems were going dark, and they had no idea why. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat. I just answered calmly. I didn't do anything, Aiden. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. There was a beat of silence. Then confusion gave way to anger. A trigger? What are you talking about? This is sabotage. No, I said, keeping my tone even. It's protocol. It's clause 9.13, my original employment agreement. still legally active. He went quiet, probably scrolling, searching through files he'd never bothered to read before. He didn't even know the clause existed. "You embedded a backdoor," he hissed. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. It's not a backdoor, it's a safeguard. For exactly this scenario, unauthorized removal of the primary architect and unverified admin escalation. It's not a weapon, Aiden, it's a seatbelt. You just cut it mid-collision. I let the silence linger. I could hear him breathing harder now. "We're losing full access to the Southern logistics chain," he muttered. "Portland's offline. So is Memphis. You have to stop this." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked quietly, "Do you remember the phrase, 'your system used to fire me'?" He paused. It was just a standard line, auto-generated." "Exactly," I said. "Terminated, effective immediately." That wasn't just corporate cruelty, Aiden. That was the trigger. Another voice in the background shouted something about a dashboard timeout in Seattle, and I could feel it the moment he finally understood. But by then, it was already too late. Because once the system recognizes abandonment, it doesn't ask for permission to protect itself. And somewhere in that spiraling chaos, another screen was about to go black. I didn't post anything. No statement, no whistleblower thread, no dramatic expose. Let the lawyers scramble. Let the board argue. Let Aiden sweat through 3 floors of system failure and ghosted dashboards. I stayed home, made tea, sat in the quiet. I'd built Graviton's core to be strong, not dependent. But like any structure, once you start removing weight-bearing pillars without understanding what they're holding up, eventually the beams give. Still, this wasn't about revenge. I didn't want their collapse. I wanted the truth to be undeniable. So I didn't sue, didn't leak documents, didn't send scathing emails with bold red subject lines. I just forwarded 2 files to the board. One, a signed scan of my 2011 contract, highlighting Clause 9.13, and 2, a system log from 7:06 a.m. M.M, showing the exact moment failsafe echo activated. No commentary, no summary. Let the system speak for itself. That night, while the corporate Slack channels burned, I boxed up my old notes, hand-drawn architecture drafts, flowcharts no one had asked to see in years, sticky notes from old crisis nights where we patched vulnerabilities between midnight and sunrise. I didn't know if they'd ever admit what happened, didn't expect an apology. But as I wrapped a frayed Ethernet cable into a drawer, something in me shifted. I didn't feel triumphant, didn't feel bitter. I just felt done. Then, just as I closed the box, my phone buzzed. A message from an organization I had quietly admired for years. "We build security systems for hospitals, schools, and humanitarian networks. We followed your work. If you ever feel ready, we'd love to talk." I didn't open it right away. I just let the message sit there, glowing softly in the dark. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't rushing toward anything. I had time. And maybe, just maybe, I finally had a choice again. The sun was just starting to rise when I powered down the old console for the last time. No ceremony, no grand gesture, just a quiet click and the hum of something finally at rest. I didn't need to see what happened next. The calls, the internal memos, the emergency meetings. They'd spend weeks trying to rebuild what they tore down in arrogance. Aiden, he didn't last. You can't lead a system you never bothered to understand. Last I heard, he stepped down to pursue other opportunities. As for me, I didn't take the nonprofit's offer right away. I let the message sit for a while, like something soft you're not sure you deserve to hold. Instead, I took a walk, unplugged for the first time in years. No firewalls, no credentials. No dashboards screaming for attention. And that's when my daughter called. She was nervous, I could hear it in her voice. "Mom, I got accepted into the digital ethics program. I want to build systems like you did, ones that protect people, not just profits." I froze. Not because I was surprised, but because something deep inside me, something I hadn't realized was still aching, finally let go. I didn't need to be remembered in the company logs. I didn't need a plaque or a press release. Legacy isn't about who remembers your name. It's about what you leave standing and who decides to carry it forward. So, no, I didn't win. But I didn't lose either. I just lasted. Long enough for the truth to catch up. And in the end, that was enough. Have you ever walked away from something not in defeat, but in clarity? Not because you were weak, but because you finally knew your worth? I'd love to hear your story. Because sometimes sharing it is how we remind each other that we were never invisible to begin with.